I realized and had this, epiphany somewhat early on that I was having way more fun on my nights and weekends buying and investing in real estate and trying to figure out how to do deals. And even though they were small ones that I was starting to do, I was trying to use more of like an LP GP model and trying to do it more institutional. And a lot of this was just by like reading books or networking with people such as yourself, like in the evenings.
There is a new American dream. One that doesn't involve working till you're 65 before you start enjoying life. If you're someone looking for ways to regain control over your time and check off that bucket list now, you're in the right place. We share tips from experts on investing, personal finance, and mindset so that you can finally have the freedom to work less and live more. This is the Freedom Investing Podcast with your host, Chris Toribio.
What's going on, everyone? This is Chris Toribio with the Freedom Investing Podcast, and I'm so happy you're here to join us for another amazing episode. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes. Moving on to today's guest, we have Zach Feldman. Zach is the Vice President of Development at Aptitude Development, one of the nation's top student housing firms. He spearheads the company's new development efforts around the country, focusing on sourcing and underwriting new opportunities, as well as pre-development, entitlement, capital markets, and investor relations. Aptitude currently owns 1,500 beds with another $250 million of student housing under construction or set to break ground. Prior to joining Aptitude Development, Zach launched ENJOI 77 Holdings shortly after graduating college and is still active today. ENJOI 77 Holdings is a real estate investment company specializing in student housing and multifamily investments in the Northeast with over 22 assets in the portfolio. In addition to real estate, E77 has holdings in the tech sector and solar development fields. Outside of work, Zach is focused on the Wildcat Fund, a nonprofit organization he co-founded that provides mentorship and college financial aid to students of color from his high school alma mater. Zach, welcome to the show. Before we dive into it, give us a quick 2-minute rundown of who you are, your background, and where you are in your journey to achieving time freedom.
Sure. So my name is Zach Feldman. Well done. Very good intro, Chris. But I currently live in New York City. I grew up in Boston. I've been in New York for about 9 years. I originally started out my career in the energy industry. My kind of dream out of college was to be a renewable energy trader. And this was sort of at the time when, I was young and very impressionable, and I, started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and how do you create all this freedom in your life, and I had these experiences kind of during college and high school where if you were playing golf or you're at a golf course, it kind of felt like a lot of the people that I would meet that had all this free time were in the real estate industry. So I'm like, no matter what I do, I want to invest in real estate. These guys seem to have a lot of free time during the week, and I didn't really know heads from tails at that point. But when I was about 22, I made it on the desk of a renewable energy trading desk. And this was like my dream job. This is, in college, what I really thought I wanted to do. And at that same time, I was buying my first 4-family using like an FHA loan, house hacking. And I realized and had this, epiphany somewhat early on that I was having way more fun on my nights and weekends buying and investing in real estate and trying to figure out how to do deals. And even though they were small ones that I was starting to do, I was trying to use more of like an LP GP model and trying to do it more institutional. And a lot of this was just by like reading books or networking with people such as yourself, like in the evenings. But I knew that I had kind of my day job at my W-2, but I wanted to kind of build this out on the side. So as time kind of went on, I knew I wanted to do that more professionally. And fast forward, I was, buying these student housing buildings, but they were, single families or two units or 4 units. And I'd kind of have different partners in different markets that I thought made a lot of sense to be able to kind of keep my day job, but also I didn't really know a lot of what I was doing at the beginning. So I'd partner with a guy who had a construction company, or maybe there was a manager I liked. I would have him, do something, and I would, bring in hard money or things, whatever structure I could just to buy more. But I had kind of had, I guess, a second epiphany, and this was all during kind of the WeWork days that, you needed to create a different kind of edge. I was young, but I was hustling, but I was competing against not only veterans for a 4-family in small college towns, but I was also competing with people that were from, regional hubs that were also investing in student housing. So I kind of had this thesis that you either have to create value by doing something different by maybe a WeWork, so you complain about Adam Newman, but he did create an arbitrage there to a certain degree, or development, which you really create value through construction. And that's how I ended up at Aptitude Development, where I head up our new development around the country for ground up student housing. And that was kind of where I got from energy trader all the way to developer to today. And that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell, but it's been a fun ride so far.
That's awesome. And, we were talking before this show, Zach, about your background and how we haven't really had anyone who has been in student housing so far on the show. So that's a really interesting asset class that I'd like to dive into a little bit more. But beforehand, can you kind of describe what is renewable energy trading in the first place? Like I've never even heard of that profession before.
I'm not sure I even understand, but in a nutshell, there's certain requirements in states that you have to have, and certain companies too want to offset their carbon emissions. So you can essentially buy a credit to offset your amount of energy that you burned. And the way you buy the credit is if you're a renewable energy generation facility, you every megawatt hour of energy that you create, you get a credit that you can then sell. So you not only do you sell the electricity, but you also sell the credit. So if you're a solar farm in New Jersey, you will get a credit based on how much you produce per year. And if I'm a dirty, or an energy company that needs for a state requirement to offset my current amount, I can buy those credits and kind of keep it within my compliance levels. So people will
Wow.
trade for their own book or for others, and try and make spreads based on what they think's happening in the marketplace. Um, but it wasn't tangible. I liked that I could go put it in the kitchen and get more rent, and those kinds of things that I liked more. And I felt that it was something I had more fun doing. And I also think part of the reason that some people either get interested or really enjoy real estate is the design aspect of it. And I always love taking what is it today, what's the highest and best use, and how can we create that? What does the capital structure look like? What are the partnership structures look like? What are the different debt markets going to be? What are the rents? Can we hit them? How do we get there? I think all of those different factors I love. I mean, I call it being like an orchestra conductor. You have all the different kind of aspects, and if it doesn't all work out, your project or your orchestra won't sound very well.
Absolutely. That's actually a really, really good comparison because you're right. There's so many different hats that you have to wear that a lot of people don't really realize before jumping into this industry is that, you have everything from sourcing out the deals to analyzing them to running through the project and undergoing construction, managing contractors. And on the end of that, you still have to manage the asset. You still have to deal with tenants, and you have to do the leases and all of the above. And so there's a lot of different
Yeah,
hats you have to wear. And as you said, it's just like an orchestra and a symphony. And
exactly.
so really good insight there. So it sounds like you got interested in real estate early on in your college career. And by the age of 22, you were already jumping right into it. And so I
Hmm.
know that you had mentioned that a lot of the influence came from people who you saw either on the golf course or doing these other leisurely activities. It seemed to be that a lot of these people who had the most time in their lives had some sort of real estate investing component to it. And so that was really good insight early on. But talk to us about how you actually learned how to jumpstart your real estate investing career, starting with that four flat that you used with
Yeah,
FHA housing.
I I'm a huge believer in mentors, and my family owns a little bit of real estate, and my uncle, who's not my uncle, owns some real estate, and that was just something that I was kind of around growing up. It wasn't something that I knew I wanted to do. I mean, I got my real estate license at 18, and I started renting apartments in the summers, but like you just had no idea what you were doing, and I was certainly not focused on a career at 18 by any means. I was trying to have a good time. But I always knew I wanted to be successful, and this seemed like a widget that might be part of that. Um, but and I know you're going to ask, what book changed your life as part of the five questions that you guys asked. But I say this to everyone: if you're interested in getting in real estate, buy the book, The Real Estate Game by William Porville. I mean, that totally was the best. It's real estate 101, but it's so much better. I would kind of write things down, and then I'd go talk to someone and say, "Is this how you get to your NOI and your cap rate? And this is how you would model it out. How would you look at this?" And I would do it in Excel, and kind of the old timers that I would talk to would do it on a napkin, but we get to the same result. And that was the kind of the best education that I had with that book, and then I would start applying it to deals that I was looking at. Um, but I think a lot of it too is people like mentoring, people starting out or younger individuals. if you're, trying to get started. People like helping out. And I also think the other part of that is if you can create value for someone else, and I think this is kind of another conversation of being passive, you don't have to go figure out how to build a World Trade Center day one. But if you can bring value to someone that's maybe doing a 4 unit or a larger development or even, acquisitions or something like that, find a site, find money for them, try and help, make their life easier. You can add value to a deal and create value for them very quickly without having to do the whole thing from A to Z. And I think people kind of forget about that. You can have a passive piece of every deal you do, but you need to figure out where you fit in and how you create value for someone else. And I think that people forget there's so many people involved in a project that you can have a slice of the pie. And if you have a lot of slices, you're going to do well. And there's 1,000 different ways to cut it up, which is another reason why I find real estate so compelling.
You're absolutely right, especially at scale. I mean, real estate truly is a team sport. I mean, even as you said, even if you're purchasing a small single-family home or you're purchasing a small multi-unit, the fact is like, you are the investor, but you also have to coordinate, contractors. You have to work with a real estate agent if you're not one yourself. You have a lender. You need to have a property manager. You have all these different things and all these different people on your team that if you can figure out a way to fit into someone else's team, that's definitely an opportunity to kind of help get your feet wet in the industry. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And so, apart from multifamily, you purchased that first floor flat. What was that experience like first to begin with? I guess like when you first purchased that floor flat, what was the whole intention there, and what was that like?
Honestly, it was like brazen arrogance. I just think, I was very young. I was like, everyone, says invest in real estate. I kind of, was down the street from where I had my day job. And it was reasonably what we thought was well priced. And all I knew was I could cover my debt service, and in 30 years, I'd have a free building. And that was kind of the thought process is, I know I'm not buying this for like a high cash on cash or looking to get, a 2x multiple on anything. I just want to do like pay the bills and put a couple bucks in my pocket. But I think more than that, it got me confident. Just because once you buy the first one, you kind of get the monkey off your back. And then, my next thought was, well, I just graduated college. I know how kids think. I can go do student housing, and that seems like way more fun. I just lived in one of these. But I didn't really have any money at the time to invest. So what I did was I took every single college town in America, and then I went on like a rent-o-meter, like a Zumper, and I took the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom rent per unit, and then I came up with my rent per bed, which is like an industry metric. And then I took the median home price in those zip codes, and I figured out if I don't have that much money, but I want to go do student housing, where can I get the highest yield on my dollars today? So then I came up with like the top 10 markets, and 2 of them were where I started investing, which is Providence, Rhode Island, and Buffalo, New York. In Buffalo, I called my best friend from college, who was like a broker at a Cushman. And we started buying like, 2 families and single families. And then in Providence, I met a group of people who were starting to do some deals and had their own management company. And we arranged capital, and they would do the renovations and manage the building. And they essentially got sweat equity in the upside. And that ended up being a good structure as well. But, again, it was not really know what I'm doing, saying, I think I can understand this. And I think a lot of confidence is I'll figure it out. And I say this all the time. Even if I built one building today, even if I build something directly across the street, it's going to be different. The design is going to be a little bit different. The soils that you're building into are going to be a little bit different. The economy you're building into is going to be a little bit different. You kind of, eventually have to say, I've done my homework. I know what I'm doing. And if things go wrong, I will figure it out. And it's kind of like grab your gonads and go sometimes. It really is. You have to trust that you'll be able to figure it out. And I think a lot of people get that analysis paralysis where, eventually you got to jump and feel strongly that you're going to, your wings are going to come out.
I love that. Yeah, there's a really good friend of mine over here in Chicago that we had this conversation recently, and he said the same exact thing. He was like, the success that you achieve in this industry and what you should be striving for is not knowing that you're going to know everything that's going to happen because it's impossible to predict. The confidence comes from yourself and knowing that like you will be able to get through whatever comes your way, regardless
Absolutely.
of what it is. No, that's fantastic.
And I think for anyone listening, right, Chris is a great guy. Like if you jump and you're, a little scared coming down, reach out to resources. People are more than happy to help because I think back in the day, people didn't want to tell you anything. It was just very like closed doors. This is my business. These are my rents. I'm not helping you. people now, if like you live across the street and are like renovating a building, will come over and be like, "Oh, those are cool finishes. Like, what'd you guys, where'd you guys source those from? This is where I got mine from." It's much more open dialogue where people want other people to win.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great environment nowadays, and it's pretty interesting thinking how that used to be back then. And so, you purchases these homes with the intention of converting them to student housing. And as you had mentioned, you were taking a look at the median home price, you were taking a look at the average rent per bed, and seeing what you can kind of generate and maximize your spread there. Now, these two markets that you decided to first invest in, how far away were they from where you were actually residing at the time?
Yeah, so Buffalo is definitely a plane ride. It's a long drive, and then Rhode Island was in between New York and Boston, so I felt very comfortable going there. But I think a lot of what made me feel comfortable is having local partners, and having like teams around me, like management companies that we interviewed that we felt comfortable with. And that's kind of a longer conversation, self-managing versus having someone else. But um, there were areas that I felt comfortable enough in and had partners in the area where I felt very comfortable going and doing the work that we intended to do. I still own those today. For the most part, they are relatively passive. And then you know, I don't regret that at all. I think holistically, especially as I moved on to doing larger projects, with the Aptitude Development team, you got to have trust in the partners you make, and if you don't feel comfortable with the person you're in bed with at that point, make a quick decision and change and iterate and continue to move forward. If you have a bad management company or a bad contractor, if you don't, like some of the team that you have in place, figure out how to get around that, but don't let the thesis or what could be successful suffer because of that.
I love that. Yep, absolutely. It's take long to hire and quick to fire if needed, right?
Definitely.
And so, when it came to first finding that team, what did that look like for you? As you said, these markets were not like directly in your backyard, and so it
Hmm.
required you to kind of really rely on the team that you had boots on the ground to
Sure.
run your project, right? So, how did you go about finding these people? Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, I still don't think there's a great system to find local managers, especially if you're doing smaller projects. When we started buying in, Buffalo, we ended up with like 6 or 7 houses. It wasn't, this huge portfolio where we could attract a gray star or anything like that. But we interviewed like 15 local managers and, felt who was the most confident that can execute. And over the years, we've had a few different companies, but one or two have been great, one or two have been horrible. And that's just kind of part of it. And I think with anyone that's looking to buy real estate, I recommend outsourcing management just because I think, especially if you're looking to have freedom and time and the passive nature of it. And I know there's a lot of individuals that have been very successful with setting up systems where it'll call a plumber, it'll call something like that. I always think there's a human element to if you're having an emergency at your house, you want someone to help you. So I still think management companies are great, and I'd rather give someone 5, 10% of what we could potentially make to take some of the headaches off my plate and have, a weekly or monthly call. There's the first building we bought in Stanford, we still own. And that was the one I bought right out of college, and we get an email once a month and we get a distribution once a month, and that's really it. And it's truly passive. There's other ones that have taken like, a year of really passive and then like 6 months of kind of digging back into the dirt and figuring out how we right size the ship. But um, I always recommend using like bigger pockets. I think is still pretty good. But a lot of it too is use your professional network. So if you're going to go invest in Chicago, ask Chris if he knows anyone that's investing in the area. If you're going to be in New York, ask me. Someone will know someone that will know someone, or ask maybe your closing attorney says, who else do you represent in the area that has, that seems to be doing well, and who do they manage with? Management companies need scale to make money. Same thing with attorneys and every other professional kind of in the industry. And most of them become small communities very quickly. Where if you're good, you have a reputation. If you're bad, you have a reputation. Um, you know, Again, you can say, "Hey, I got a quote from this contractor. Have you ever heard of them?" And most of the time, it'll be yes, no, maybe. And those are good yeses and really bad nos typically. So I think people shouldn't have to feel like they do these, that it's all on them and to do them by themselves the whole time. Just ask the people that you're working with or you're talking to. And again, I think Bigger Pockets is a good one. LinkedIn, you can ask just a basic question. People will give you feedback. Um, and probably maybe there's a forum on the Freedom Investing podcast, or if there's not, maybe there should be. Where you can help other people find professionals in the area. But I always recommend, especially from like the passive investment side, to outsource as much as you can. Find a good bookkeeper, find a good CPA, find a good management company. Those little things that if you can pay someone a couple of dollars, that's worth your time, or even if it's a significant dollar volume, if you feel comfortable and they're doing a good job, it's really priceless.
Absolutely. I love that. We talk about this all the time. It's like not just leveraging the capital that you have, but leveraging the time that you have by having people who are potentially better than you even at executing a certain plan and letting them deal with it so you can focus on what you do best. That's incredible.
I do think, Chris, which is maybe kind of a good segue into like the aptitude development lens and doing large ground up student housing. And I'm happy to kind of give some feedback on why I love the industry and why I think it's so great. Is I actually don't think there's a such thing as passive investing. I think it's somewhat of a fallacy in today's marketplace, and I don't mean to like blow up the podcast, but if you want to,
Well, that's
it.
it.
I think that's part of why you have structures. Even like if you look at a hedge fund, like a 2 and 20, or real estate, there's a waterfall structure where maybe they're getting 30% once you hit a certain hurdle. I always think about if that person's is 30% better at what they do than what you do, and you have to go learn all of those things, wouldn't you rather go trust someone else to do it the right way that has a ton of experience, but still know you're getting a very favorable return with a professional? And, I think there's something to be said about a lifestyle balance where, maybe you can answer emails on the beach, or maybe you can take a phone call from home and you don't have to slog in a commute for, 2 hours every single day. And as you, make more money and, accumulate capital, kind of putting those into different verticals that you feel comfortable in. But I personally believe it's a fallacy that's been kind of presented down, and I don't think it's necessarily like a knock on bigger pockets, but like you can't expect to make a big return on your money doing the same thing everyone else is, by yourself without having to pick up a phone or email or ever like go look at a site. Like it's just I've never found that possible, and I've listened to your podcast. Um, I just think it's this false dream that's been sold. And, if you want to get really competent at something, you have to put in the time. Or if you really want, passive income, invest with others. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I say that to people all the time that are looking to invest in the aptitude development ground up projects. We're really good at what we do. And we take a lot of pride in what we do. Invest in us and we'll deliver for you. But like, it's not worth going and trying to relearn the system from A to Z unless you want to spend a lot of time doing it. And is it worth giving up a little bit of the upside for someone that this is what they breathe?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. So that way you can focus on what it is that you want to do in your life. Like, that's the thing too, is like, there's this huge hype behind active real estate investing and what it has to offer. And you're absolutely right. Like, there's no such thing as like a completely passive investment unless you're truly a passive investor, right?
Yep.
And there's so many different components to it, as we outlined earlier. And so you really have to kind of sit back and take a step back and really look at your life and take inventory of what it is that you actually want that to look like, and have
Absolutely.
clarity on that first. So that way you can reverse engineer your investment strategy from there. Yeah, that's a really good point there, and I love that. And so, on that note, aptitude. So, you were investing, with your ENJOI 77 holdings, and you ultimately joined Aptitude Development, and really worked at scaling up this ground up development in the similar asset class that you were investing in on a personal level. So,
Yeah.
so talk about this. Talk us about that. Like, how did you find Aptitude, and why did you ultimately join them in the first place?
Yeah. So, a good example is I was buying stuff in upstate New York, and not Buffalo, but a different smaller college market. It was a Saturday, and I was going to Dunkin' Donuts at like 9 a.m. I had, woken up at 6 and already driven 3 hours. And I was buying these small, duplexes and multi-units by this college. And I remember pulling into a Dunkin' Donuts at 9 a.m. And keep in mind, this is like bumfuck USA, right? It's like a state school, probably not the best place to put capital looking back on it. It's done very well. I'm very happy with it. But, and I'm pulling into a Dunkin' Donuts, and there's a brand new Range Rover, like a New York Knicks license plate. And I just go to the guy, I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? You're obviously from New York City. Like, what are you doing in this town? He goes, I'm buying real estate. It's a great student housing market here. And I'm like, all right, this is fucked. This is not a place to go like double down anymore. And I and a lot of what I was doing was buying stuff in great locations in what I thought were good college markets, and like gut renovating them or trying to make it the highest quality unit. So if you want to, most kids live on college freshman year, on campus freshman year in a dorm, and then you can either move off campus. And your typical options in college towns are, single family homes where you have a keg in the living room, older apartment buildings that kids live in due to location, or Class A brand new, essentially apartment communities, but they're catered to students. And a lot of that's from a design standpoint. Like you'll have 4 bedroom, 4 baths. Instead of having conference rooms, you'll have study rooms and more like presentation centers. And we focus a lot on the amenities you can put into these buildings. But I had this kind of, realization that you have to create value through construction. While I was doing these renovations and doing these great projects, by taking what is a parking lot today, or an older suburban office complex, or a strip center, or maybe it's like your pizza shop and Chinese restaurant in town, and instead of having a single-story building, creating a 10-story building with ground floor retail adjacent to campus, you're creating the highest and best use for that location in college towns. And while I was doing well with the renovations, I really had this, that's where I thought the arbitrage could be made in the spread to create value for investors and, myself, by creating something out of nothing and creating ground up large scale developments for undervalued land at college campuses. But I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't want to go learn how to do a $50 million construction project on my own. And these guys were doing a lot of the right things, but they were still growing firm. And kind of just like showed up at their office one day and was like cold emailing them and said, "Hey, I'm doing this at a small scale. You guys are doing it at a big scale. Let me come crush it for you." And they were like, "No, no, no, no." And, fast forward, 4+ years, and I head up all of our new development around the country. We have close to $400 million in construction right now. We're breaking ground on a $75 million project in the next couple of weeks. And, it's been a good ride so far, but that was kind of my story of how I got into Aptitude. But, I understand how to do it on the small scale. I was raising money from investors. I was negotiating with banks. I was finding contractors, dealing with the architects. And I just wanted to learn how to do it at a much bigger scale. And I think that thesis has played out, because I still look at smaller deals as well. I actually invest passively with other people all the time who I believe in their strategy and what they're doing. But I truly believe the most value you can create in real estate is through ground up construction. You're creating a spread and creating value that someone else just can't do by adding kitchens.
Wow, that's a really good insight there. And so, you had initially said that when you were reaching out to Aptitude, many of the answers you were receiving were no, no, and more no. So,
Yeah.
so what actually ended up happening to where you finally convinced them, say, "Fine, come and join our team"?
I think the way I approached it, and I had enough jobs over the years to kind of realize that, maybe the company you want to work at isn't hiring, right? Whether it's the hottest new tech company, or if it's, the biggest real estate company. And, I also didn't go to an Ivy League. I didn't have, a banking background where it jumps, through a resume scanner. And I really reverse engineered that process, where I said, if I'm going to go work in development and kind of start from the bottom again, where, I was doing well and I was, could pay my bills through my side investments. I didn't want to go work for a firm where I was going to be a cog in the wheel. I wanted to work for people that were actively doing projects. The worst thing you can do is, if you're trying to learn, is to work for someone that like can't pull the trigger or doesn't have the capital to actually go execute. And I wanted to go into student housing, so I kind of knew my asset class. I looked up like the top 20 active developers in the country, and then I looked up their employee count, and I said, okay, well, I don't want to be number 500. I want to be, like the top 10 guys in the door. So I can learn. I really wanted to learn how to do this at an institutional scale. And that was kind of how I picked the X firms to go look into. They were speaking on panels at conferences, so it means they were spending money on marketing dollars, and that they wanted to get their name out there, and they were about to go on a run. And that's kind of how I perceived it. And I recommend that to people in every industry, right? Like, you can go work for a BlackRock, but you're going to be a cog in a wheel. And you can go work for a JP Morgan, right? And you might do very well. But if you work for the guy that just left JP Morgan and started his own fund, you'll probably have much more exposure. So after a couple of years, if you want to go compete with them, you have your roadmap set and you've got more exposure. If you're going to go work for a related group, which we all know is on a tear and they're doing a tons of projects, but if you're in acquisitions for office in certain markets, that's all you're going to see, and all you're going to do is underwrite deals all day long. Whereas if you work for a smaller firm, you're going to have to do everything because there's no other choice. They have to utilize you, but your exposure to that and kind of your being well-rounded in the business will be like really unmatched to anything else. And I certainly feel that's the best way to do it, is to reverse engineer the job that you want, and then just go find the companies and find a way in there, network with people like Chris or me, or do you know anyone, go through LinkedIn. And most people, again, are willing to at least have like a sit down with you or a coffee. And then once you get in the door, you got to figure out how to make them say yes. And that's kind of what happened for me.
Really, really awesome. You're right. Yeah, you picking out someone where that can present you an opportunity to do everything as opposed to specializing and being just like the one of 500 people who are analyzing deals for them on a regular basis is going to be a completely different experience than someone who just left that type of firm and
Sure.
is starting up their own thing and gives you the ability to kind of get exposure to all the different aspects of the business. That's awesome.
But I don't
And
recommend working for a big company. I know it sounds maybe biased and dumb, but it ultimately depends what you want to do. If you want to make a lot of money in a senior role for a big company, that might be the right way to do it. Always wanted to understand this, where if the world fell apart and I had to do my own thing, I had a really good MBA, and that was really my real world MBA. That I'm very happy, with what I'm doing, and I'm not planning to leave. But I wanted to have a skill set where I knew everything, not just one specific niche that, wasn't really translatable if, God forbid, student housing was no longer, a reasonable asset class to go into.
right, right. And so, with that being said, I mean, you've been with Aptitude now at this point, and you kind of talked about how you can carry on these type of skill sets that you've acquired while working with them into your own personal investment strategy, right? So, can you kind
Sure.
of dive into that a little bit as far as like how has your investment strategy shifted through Enjoy 77 Holdings due to the experience that you've kind of gained working with Aptitude?
Yeah, I think honestly, this is going to be somewhat counterintuitive. Is um, know when to hold them, when know when to fold them. I think there's certain things that I wanted to make happen so bad, and seeing things at a larger scale and kind of how that works. Things that you maybe wanted to fight for a while. I've exited some projects just because I don't think it's worth the time anymore. And I think when you only have a few investments at the beginning, you really want to make them work. And even though you know in your gut the writing's on the wall, maybe to let them go. And all of those have turned out well, and that's I'm very proud of what I've done. But I think that's a big thing is knowing if you won the hand, maybe just take your chips off the table and kind of continue to reinvest into other things. Um, and the other way I've approached kind of what I'm doing at a larger scale to what I'm doing at a smaller scale is actually investing with others. And I think that is something that I always thought I wanted to be the only lead sponsor and do these, 4 units in great college towns and, raise money from like a Chris and then give them a return and double it and triple it and continue to go. And that's still something I actively pursue. But I think if you find someone that's really good at what they do, it's okay to give them 30% of the upside or to give them a promote or a fee because they earned it and they're creating value for your dollars. And that's something that I look to do more is actually invest with, other sponsors that are really good at what they do. And instead of me having to decide to allocate every single dollar into XYZ. I think it's a complete misnomer that you have to just do everything yourself and find an investment. If you're interested in real estate, go be an LP, right? And maybe a condition of what you do is I want to go to the construction site, once a month, and I want to walk through with one of the guys from your office so I understand the development process. And there's other things I've invested in too that I don't understand the asset class that well, but I know it's performing very well. Um, and I think how you allocate dollars and kind of your portfolio allocation, I've understood more and more as I've done it for other people through our student housing verticals. And I recommend other people do that too.
Very, very good advice there. And before we head into our Freedom Five, I had one more question, and that was kind of like your insights into the economy at the moment, right? Because as of right now, this recording, right, we are
Yeah.
at the beginning of March 12th. We just received news that Silicon Valley Bank had just kind of folded here. Interest rates are continuing to rise. Asset class prices hasn't really reflected anything just yet. Inflation is still on the rise. Like, talk to us about like your insights with regards to the economy and how you kind of what does your crystal ball look like, Zach?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. And I say this so honestly. If I knew where it was going, or if I knew where interest rates were going, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be on like an island somewhere. And that's as much as I enjoy spending time with you, right? I don't know. I think the best thing that we're looking to do as a firm is to double down on entitlements because, part of the thesis is in 12, 18, 24 months, we're going to be in a different place. But if you have approved projects that maybe aren't working today, in 12 months, we might be in a much better place where we can go break ground on all of these. And then the other thing we're doing is being much more selective about locations and markets we go play in. Student housing, like all other asset classes, especially for ground up, is driven a lot by your yield on cost that you feel you can get on a project, and where that can be, and a lot of that is driven by where construction costs are today and the rents we think we can get. So a good example of this, Chris, is like 4 years ago we looked at maybe 300 markets nationally, and now we look at maybe 47 that work for new construction. So it's a lot more selective about where we go. But looking at a crystal ball, I would say, location, 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 do things that you feel confident in today. I don't think sitting on your hands in cash is really the best scenario. I still like investing in bricks. And in terms of where things will be, I have no idea, but a lot of what we're doing is kind of staying the course much more selectively and being much more cautiously optimistic. If things continue the way they are, I think the worst thing you can do is, I said not the worst thing you can have is entitled piece of land in good locations that you have the ability to maybe sit on for a year or two while things settle out, and continue kind of going after those best deals. But what we're seeing is less sophisticated or undercapitalized individuals are kind of getting rid of land or maybe getting rid of projects that they were super aggressive on, and deals that we lost out on a year ago where we weren't the highest bidder. Hey, are you guys still interested? Would this work for you now? And it's like, yeah, we told you a year ago it wasn't going to work. It's only going to be a crappier offer now for your seller. He should have taken the money and ran. But crystal ball, no idea where things are going. I think they're going to get worse before they get better. I think, to your point, the Silicon Valley Bank thing, I've had calls in the last 2 days with people just like, do I take all cash out of the bank? And I don't know if that's like, where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it on your
Right.
mattress? Like that's not like really feasible in today's world. I don't recommend putting it in cryptos either, but it's an interesting time. But I forget what the Warren Buffett quote is, but like if everyone's running in different directions, stick to what you know and be confident about the bets you make. A lot of money was made between '09 and 2011, and I think a similar pattern might happen here. But go partner with someone that's really good at what they do, or if you're really good at what you do, go raise money from friends and family, or institutions that you can feel confident in. And now it's probably the time where a lot of money will be made.
Absolutely, absolutely. The biggest shifts in wealth always happen at a downturn, so it's important to consider that moving forward with your investment strategy.
I will say it's scary. Like the amount of CMBS loans that are coming due, office buildings are literally getting foreclosed on left and right, and people are saying, "Well, I don't want it anymore. I don't know what to do." So again, I don't have a crystal ball, but it is interesting times for sure. And I think if you can find a way to create that edge, you're going to do very well.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Chris? Let's hear your crystal ball.
Personally, I think just given the state of the market, I think that we are heading into a point where prices haven't really reflected any sort of change given the interest rates, and a lot of that, the underlying reason behind that is due to undersupply. People, first off, undersupply, and I also think that too many people have equity in their homes right now, and we're talking about there's probably smaller multifamily more than anything, but they don't need to sell. The people who are really going to be needing to sell here in the near future are the people who purchased assets at a very high price back in like 2021 on bridge debt that may be coming due here in the next year or so, and they'll be in a position where the lender lent to them using bridge at like extremely low interest rates, and yes, they may have the option to extend their bridge loan, but from the incentive of the lender themselves, due to the rising rates, like they may not, it may not even make sense for the lender to agree to extend those loans, right? And so for me, I think that's where the opportunity can come in is these people who purchased at cap rates extremely compressed and on these bridge loans that will be requiring them to pay them off at some point. And I think that's where the opportunity can kind of come into play there.
I certainly hope not, but like you can see scenarios where there's like pure Armageddon, right? Like what happens to all of these office buildings that have $2 trillion in CMBS coming up? But to your point, I mean, how many people were sitting at home and decided to buy their first Airbnb or their first house hack project, or maybe invested in a Chris or a Zach project and decided to go do their own 10 unit, right? Keep in mind, anything over 5 units is considered commercial for most regional and national banks. And if you bought between 2000 and 2019, really, and 2022, your rates were really low. And most of those are 5-year fixed, and then they have a 5-year floater, like the large majority, or maybe they're like a 10-year fixed. So by the time you're in 2025 to 2027, you're going to go from like, let's call it less sophisticated owners, or even like reasonably sophisticated regionals that are going to go from, 3 or 4% interest rate to like 6 to 8. And, the buildings realistically in a lot of those areas have not doubled their NOI, or they have not even increased them to a significant amount. Insurance rates are like getting ridiculous. Utilities are still pretty high. Labor is horrible for repairs and maintenance. Like you're going to have a huge issue with if they don't have a capital balance sheet that can support maybe you're seeing a lot of, instead of refi cash outs, the refi cash ins, and
Yep.
you're seeing that a lot. And I'm sure you're hearing the same thing, but like I'm genuinely like concerned about what's going to happen to a lot of these people if they don't have the balance sheets or, maybe they bought, again, I think the Airbnb is going to be like a huge concern, for a lot of people that were trying to like live this Instagram lifestyle where they're getting free money from their, vacation place in the Adirondacks, and now they, whatever the dream was. And it's, again, I think that goes to my comment earlier. It's not that easy. Like, it's not going to be purely passive and, roses all day long. It's going to take time to really hone your craft. And I think there's going to be a lot of distress down the road. The flip side is I heard that 3 years ago during COVID, and if you bought during COVID, you might have done pretty good. So it's never a clear picture. There's never a perfect crystal ball. But I do think there's going to be a lot of hurt before, things wash out.
Absolutely. All right, folks, so we're coming towards the end of today's show, but before we finish, it is time for the Freedom Five. These are 5 questions that we ask every guest on our show, starting with the most important question. What is your why? What is the underlying motivation behind everything it is that you do?
Yeah, I think that changes over time, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's healthy in life. But originally I wanted the ability to kind of do whatever I wanted every day and have financial freedom, and that's still part of the goal. But I think a lot of how that's transferred into is being proud of what I do every day, and the products that we create and put out into the world. I think people in real estate forget, if you're going to go be an app developer or a product developer, you always talk about your user experience and how you ship things into the world. A lot of what I want to start to do now, and I still want the financial freedom, but I have a caveat on that, is I want to be proud of everything I do. And I want to be able to drive by a building in 20 years and say to my kids, like, Dad built that and it's still standing and it still looks great. And there's still a lot of pride of ownership. That's kind of my why, is being proud of the things I put out into the world. But a lot of what, I do is for financial freedom and to be able to enjoy all, aspects of life. And this also goes into the passive aspect of things, is I want to be able to have a lifestyle and kind of a live work balance where I don't mind taking a call if I'm at dinner if it's something that's important, because, I take pride in what I do. And at the same time, I want to be able to, like, leave work and go to, family events if I need to, and not be like a pain in the butt for anyone else.
Absolutely. Love that. Second question we have here. What book has had the largest influence on your life? And I know I mentioned earlier, but can you kind of dive into that one again?
So I actually wouldn't say it had the largest impact on my life, because, understanding how to, evaluate a building is not really the largest impact on my life. But I highly recommend the book, The Real Estate Game, if you're investing in real estate or want to get into real estate. Every time we have a conversation with someone that says, "Hey, I want to get into real estate," it's like, well, because you watch $1 Million Listing doesn't mean you should go into the business. But I always recommend that book. I think it's a great base. Beyond that, I'd probably say The Fountainhead by, Ayn Rand. I know it's somewhat controversial. I don't necessarily see why, but I'm definitely a capitalist. I think that if you can go create value into society, you should be compensated for it. And kind of the way that whole book processes and the way it's written is very well done. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's had a monumental impact on my life, that it's okay to go create great products for people and be paid for them. And that's just the different characters they weave into. It's phenomenal. So I highly recommend that one.
All right. Fountainhead and The Real Estate Game. Make sure to check those out, guys. Third question we have here. What is the most impactful thing, whether it's a piece of technology, a habit, or a person, that has helped in freeing up your time?
This is Chris. This is like the one I didn't want to answer. Honestly, I would say like the sleep and the do not disturb function on your iPhone, because as valuable as the iPhone is, one of the things I now consider being successful in life is being able to have a flip phone. And I'm not there yet, but I want to. I'm so sick of the notifications, the thousands of emails, the texts. It is like the last time I got bored, I can't remember, and I want to be bored so my brain can think. So a lot of times I've been just like putting it in sleep mode, no notifications. Like if I need to text someone or like make a note on my phone or listen to a podcast, it's great that I can still utilize it for that. But the amount of information overload, I don't think allows your average individual to think anymore. So I've started implementing that more than I ever thought I would, and it's been phenomenal. So
I love that. I love that you mentioned that.
Like it was weird. I always thought like I wanted to have like when you're like, at least I'm only 30. So like when I was in college, it was like the guy that had like an iPhone and a BlackBerry in the business world was like the most important guy. And now I'm like, I just want a flip phone and an iPad, and I'll be like very happy. Where I know my life isn't falling apart from a passive investment standpoint, but if there's an emergency or I want to text someone, I can still do that on like a dumbed down old BlackBerry or a flip phone.
100%. I mean, it's come to the point myself too, where I set multiple different types of work. There's this work function that you can have in your phone depending on what it is that you're doing. And like, it only gives you access to certain applications. It only allows certain people to get a hold of you depending on what it is that you're doing. And I can tell you, I utilize that so much. And I have also eliminated nearly all notifications on my phone for that same reason, right? Because it's just this constant like interruption in your thought process and what you're doing in life that like, if you get interrupted for like 1-2 seconds, like the result is that you actually are not going back to that same level of thought and that deep thinking for like another 5 minutes or so. And like you get interrupted multiple times per hour. Like you're never really getting back to that state, right?
It's nearly impossible. It's really kind of scary. And this is not like a bash on big tech. Like they're extremely good at what they do, but they're motivated to have you be in your phone and to have them use their products. So it's crazy. So it's cool that you found a workaround too.
All right, Zach, number 4, what is the number one piece of advice you would give to anyone else looking to achieve more control over their time?
I thought about this one, but I don't have a good answer. The first things that come to mind is honestly, I would say carve out time on the calendar for things that you find important. Like I actually have typically on Sundays an hour of no technology that I like leave my phone and go for a walk or something like that. In terms of freedom and time, and kind of go back towards the investing portion of it. Again, if you have capital, if you're looking to create value, with your time for other people, I highly recommend putting dollars with other people that are really good at what they do.
Very good point. Love that. And the 5th and final question we have, what is the best way for our listeners to get in contact with you?
Just like text me or call me. I mean, I give out my cell phone. It's 781-789-4354. Like the amount of times I've been like, just text me if you want to like talk student housing or if you want to talk about real estate or whatever interests you. Like I am an open book. It's 2023. You don't need to like set up some BS email through an assistant. Like just text me. It's life's good.
I love that. First person who's giving out the personal phone number on our podcast. I appreciate that.
If I get harassed, Chris, I'm coming after you.
Zach, tons of really great information today. I really liked how you talked about how you got interested in real estate in the first place, how you transitioned from wanting to be a renewable energy trader to becoming an investor and working with student housing development, and then ultimately joining Aptitude Development. I loved how you talked about how you went about educating yourself to first get started, purchasing that first floor flat, and then ultimately transitioning into purchasing things out of your own market. And finally, I love how you talked about how you shared the strategy that you use day in and day out to make sure that you are as productive as possible, your mindset behind it, and ultimately what drives you forward. I just want to thank you for being a fantastic guest on our show. I look forward to remaining in touch.
Yeah, pleasure being on. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Now, if you like this show and want to learn more about how we can help you free up your time through passive real estate investments, check out www.freedominvesting.com. Make sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter and schedule an introductory call with our team. We also have a free 7-day course on what passive real estate investing is and how to get started so that you can start your journey towards earning back more time in your life. To all of our amazing listeners here on the Freedom Investing Podcast, my name is Chris Tribio. Till next time.